Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear partners and colleagues. I'm Sorana Baciu. I'm the co-founder of Chapter Zero Romania, and also the former president of Independent Directors Association, which is a host of Chapter Zero Romania. I'm thrilled and honored to welcome you at the launch of Chapter Zero Romania, the forum of Romanian business leaders aiming at implementing the World Economic Forum's principles for effective climate governance in the company they serve, in order to enable the transition to carbon neutral economy by 2050. Chapter Zero Romania, as I mentioned, is hosted by the Independent Directors Association, and I'm proud of the commitment that the association has demonstrated in building up this timely initiative, which will continue under the new leadership of my colleague Simona Fătu. With Chapter Zero Romania, we are joining a global community of over 100,000 board directors and subject matter experts gathered under the Climate Governance Initiative. Our esteemed guest, Karina Litvak, the co-founder of the Climate Governance Initiative, will give us more insights about this unique and decisive initiative that helps boards play effectively their crucial role in addressing the climate change. The launch of Chapter Zero Romania during COP26 is meant to build momentum. While previous COPs focused on governments meeting and setting targets, COP26 is witnessing the public and private sectors come together for the first time to find solutions. Moreover, the build-up to COP26 has seen a surge of net zero pledges from businesses, with some 4,500 companies now signed up to the race to zero. The transition to net zero will be very complex and involve significant roles for both the private and public sectors. Businesses are responsible for making their own transitions, but there will be also need to be collaboration. In Europe, in particular, an effective implementation of the Green Deal needs proactive governments and business. We are extremely honored to have today with us Mrs. Alexandra Maria Bocșa, State Advisor on Climate and Sustainability, who will share the Romanian presidency agenda on climate change and the expectation from business leaders in Romania. The European Green Deal embodies the EU's long-term strategy to become climate neutral. This basically means that no carbon emissions will come from energy, transport, buildings, and industry by 2050. The first milestone in this sprint to carbon neutrality is 2030, backed by the Fit for 50 package. These ambitious goals will only be achievable if all European countries increase their efforts and take action urgently. It is important to recognize that different EU countries are starting from different positions and have varying levels of resources to mitigate the impact of climate change or to build carbon neutral infrastructure. The gap between East-West should not be further widened to trigger a two-speed decarbonization of Europe. Instead, the Central and Eastern European countries must be encouraged and supported in their decarbonization efforts, and it is especially important that boards of CEE companies, including Romanian, and their stakeholders proactively engage on climate. Chapter Zero Romania is therefore proud to contribute to the global efforts to raise awareness of climate change risks and consequences. Our goal is to ensure that climate change will be an ever-present item in the discussion of the boards of Romanian companies, and I trust our esteemed panelists will share today their views on how this goal could be achieved. I'm grateful to my colleagues from the Independent Directors Association, especially to Carmen Seghete, who is a co-founder of Chapter Zero Romania, and also to Cristina Reichman, Peter Jansen, Irina Bolomei, Adelina Dumitrescu-Peculea, for their time and dedication to set up Chapter Zero Romania, as well the former association board which supported these efforts. It was a challenging but very rewarding journey, and it just started. I would also like to thank the colleagues from CGI and World Economic Forum, Karin Lidvak, Natasha Fortuin, Sylvie Bird, for their continuous guidance and support. It's much appreciated. The launch today is only the first step. Chapter Zero Romania will work together with our partners, being them from business areas, NGOs, expert matters, academia, as you will see today, to ensure that directors in Romania have access to the skills and knowledge needed to ensure the long-term resilience of their companies while supporting the transition to a zero carbon economy. Simona Fotu will present the events envisaged under Chapter Zero in 2022 later this morning. So enjoy the ride, or even better, the race to zero. And with no further ado, I would like to invite Mrs. Alexandra Boksha to take the floor. Thank you.
Good morning to everybody, and thank you so much for this invitation. I hope everybody can hear me. If not, please let me know as soon as possible. As already mentioned, thank you so much for this invitation. And I want to start by actually congratulating you on the launch of a branch of Chapter Zero in Romania, especially as this launch takes place in the context of COP26. Climate negotiations are still taking place in Glasgow as we speak, and by the end of the week, we will be able also to assess the degree to which COP26 has been successful in taking us closer to reaching our climate goals. I want to welcome Chapter Zero's initiative to build a community of non-executive directors who understand the risks and opportunities of climate change for their businesses. One of the defining features of COP26, especially of the World Leaders Summit, was the presence of businesses at the highest level at the event. And also we have seen there a lot of commitments taken by businesses at the highest level to support governments, to support activists, to support experts in their fight against climate change. The UNFCCC negotiations process developed around member states. As many of you know, actually the parties to the UNFCCC, to the convention, the Framework Convention on Climate Change, are the states. But in the last years, it has become increasingly clear that in order to deliver on climate change, in order to reach net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest, we need the participation of a wide range of actors, experts, NGOs, businesses, private banks, multilateral financial institutions, for instance. When it comes to the involvement of businesses in tackling climate change, I think we reached that point where the involvement needs to go beyond CSR activities. Many businesses will actually have to undergo transformations at their very core for us as a society to be able to reach our climate goals and prevent the most extreme effects of climate change. And in this regard, well-informed boardroom discussions on the impact of climate change are key. And Chapter Zero in this regard needs to be praised for offering non-executive directors learning opportunities, access to information, tailored knowledge, and connections with peers that can grow within the boardrooms the understanding on climate change, the risks and the opportunities that climate change poses. In the last years, we have actually seen great progress in tackling climate change, especially in areas in which environmental goals meet economic incentives, where reducing emissions actually meets economic growth. So the participation of businesses is actually essential for achieving climate objectives in Romania, whether we are talking about mitigation or we are talking about adaptation measures. I will mention that climate change has benefited, at least this is my feeling, so far, at least until 2020, from the business sector, we have seen a limited interest in climate change or climate change related issues. But things are starting to change. I think the business sector becomes more interesting in helping the societal process to fight climate change. And in the case of transnational companies, the headquarters actually embracing the climate agenda had a positive effect on the local branches of the same companies. And events like COP26, international climate events that catch the eye of the world, determine businesses, executives, as well as members of the board alike, to get more involved in responding to this challenge. As the COP26 negotiations are currently taking place in Glasgow, I want to highlight some of the expectations and goals of Romania regarding COP26. And I will mention that these expectations and goals can be met only with the support of businesses, of the private sector, of the economic sector in general. So first of all, as you are probably well aware already, for Romania it's very important to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius target alive, the target on which we agreed upon along with other members of the international community in 2015 at Paris. So to try to limit the increase in the global warming in comparison with pre-industrial times at 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. And in this regard, Romania welcomes and encourages the announcement of ambitious contributions from all relevant parties to the Paris Agreement, in particular, the major polluters. And we have seen a series of announcements taking place last week during the World Leaders Summit, and we have seen also some announcements made by major polluters this week. Then also we support the better implementation of the Paris Agreement. And in this regard, we need to improve the rules that help us make this agreement operational. And we are talking about transparency framework, international market mechanisms, the alignment of commitment timelines. We are committed to the overall EU target of reducing emissions by 55% by 2030. So under the UNFCCC system, the European Union goes as a bloc and takes commitments on behalf of member states. So as part of the European Union, Romania is supporting the target of 55% reduction in emissions by 2030. And hopefully we will be able to also implement this very ambitious target by making good use of a legislative package that you already heard about, Fit for 55, a package that was announced on the 14th of July 2020, also 2021, also in preparation of the COP. So on 14th of July 2021, we have this package being released by the European Commission, and currently this package, which will implement or help us implement the 55% target, is currently under debate. Also very important for Romania and for the entire world are the adaptation measures. So when it comes to climate change, we have two types of measures. We have the mitigation measures, which refer to reducing emissions, but also we have a set of measures that we refer to as being adaptation measures, because we know that the emissions that are already in the atmosphere will actually cause a certain amount of effects. For instance, floods, for instance, heat waves. So then countries also need to think about how do they cope with those effects of climate change that are already visible. However, Romania supports, alongside the European Union, the argument according to which if we manage to be successful in mitigation, then we are going to have to do less adaptation. So we consider adaptation to be important, but we also want to highlight this relation between mitigation and adaptation. And we argue that a stronger or a firmer set of measures related to mitigation will also help us, because we are going to have to do less adaptation. But that being said, we do recognize that we need to develop in Romania and also internationally the capacity to respond to climate change, to adapt to climate change, and also to dedicate finance for adaptation measures. I will also mention that during this almost 2 weeks of COP26, Romania has joined several initiatives. So when it comes to COP26 and climate change, the whole process, the negotiations are actually multilateral negotiations involving all the members to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. But in addition to the framework negotiations, there are also all kinds of initiatives that are launched. Such an initiative in Glasgow was the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forest and Land Use, that was looking in particular at nature-based solutions to tackle climate change. Also, another initiative that Romania is joining is AIM4C, the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate. And by joining that initiative, Romania is also pledging to invest more resources, human resources and financial resources, in conducting research on how we can adapt our agricultural and food systems to climate change. And of course, this is another area where we ideally would like companies that are involved in food production to support the country and to support the involvement of Romania with this initiative. And also in Glasgow, we discussed the enhanced bilateral cooperation with the United States on low carbon technologies. And here we can speak about nuclear energy, but the discussions that we had with the United States also included renewable energy, energy storage solutions, and green mobility. And hopefully some of the discussions that Romania took part in at Glasgow, either through the voice of the president of Romania or through the voice of different ministers and representatives of the government that attended the event, hopefully those discussions will be the basis for further cooperation with different international partners on areas of interest to us, including, as I mentioned, low carbon technologies. Here again, we will need the corporate sector, the private sector companies to kind of, once a signal was given at the political level, to continue the discussion with companies and business counterparts in different countries, including the United States, on joint commercial opportunities that can generate economic growth, but at the same time are very important for the climate agenda. So I want to thank you so much for your attention. And if something was not clear, I'm very happy to answer any kind of additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bokce, Alexandra. Thank you so much. Indeed, I think it's a great momentum now for us to join forces, both public and private sector. It's the only way, actually, to achieve this very demanding race towards net zero. So it's very important that Romania has been involved actively at COP and also pledged for various initiatives. And I think we can assure you from the business perspective that we will do all the efforts to support these pledges, and even more to achieve what is included in the Green Deal, European Green Deal. So thank you very much for that. For sure, we'll build a partnership with you and also with the government as such. And I would like now to give the floor to Karina Litvak, who is actually the co-founder of this great initiative, the climate governance initiative, together with the World Economic Forum. I've been watching Karina for more than 3 years, and I was inspired by her passion to put on board's agenda this critical item. So she was extremely supportive to our efforts in Romania, which is not, I would say, the market does not the same depth and say structure as in UK or other Western countries, but here also there are lots of executives and non-executive independent directors who are concerned about climate change and would like to be prepared to tackle this in a very professional manner. So with no further ado, I would kindly invite Karina to tell us about the history. Karina to tell us about the history and also what's now on the agenda of climate governance initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sorana, and it's absolutely a pleasure and an honor to be here. And I remember that day that we met 3 years ago in Milan, and you have been so persistent and so determined to get Romania to this point, and I really thank you for it. So, I'm going to spend a few minutes telling you why we even created the CGI, the Climate Governance Initiative, its origins, and most importantly, what we are setting out to do. So, firstly, myself, I have a background in the financial markets. I specialize in sustainable investment, going back 25 years when it was not even something that anybody knew what it was. And then 8 years ago, I was nominated by a group of institutional investors to serve on the board of Italy's oil major, Eni or Eni, a name you may be familiar with. And I discovered very quickly that it's a lot easier for investors to demand that companies and boards take ownership of the climate challenge and transform their businesses than it is to do. And it is really difficult in the boardroom to know how to even begin to approach this thing. It's very challenging. It's very complex. It's enormous in its scale. And in many ways, it exceeds the ability of any one company to make a difference. And so this really made for a very difficult challenge. And as a director, when I looked around for, advice, guidance, ideas from fellow directors about how to approach this, I realized pretty quickly that there was nothing. There was no guidance. There was no how-to manual on how directors should consider climate change, bring it into the boardroom, incorporate it into all of the routine functions that board committees have to do. And so with the support of my chief executive at Eni and my then chairman at Eni, who now chairs the B20, Emma Marcialia, I went to the World Economic Forum, basically with my hand open to say, can you please be the home for this initiative? You're the only global organization that has the visibility, the stature, the networks to actually put this on the map. And to its credit, the World Economic Forum responded favorably immediately. The World Economic Forum had made a commitment to something called the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, which is a now very, very high-profile, widely supported initiative that was launched by the former governor of the Bank of England and chairman of the European Financial Stability Board, Mark Carney. He's now the UN climate envoy at COP26. He was the one who came up with the idea of creating a reporting framework for companies to investors on climate change, what the company is doing in terms of its governance, its strategy, the targets and metrics that it is setting, and of course, disclosure. And the World Economic Forum had pledged to support the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, known as TCFD. And as I just mentioned, the first pillar in the TCFD is governance. So enter the CGI, we are all about governance. We are all about reinterpreting, reimagining, redesigning board governance to make sure that this is seen at the heart of the decision-making entity in every company in the boardroom as something that we own. It's our responsibility. You know, you heard earlier from our speaker that about the urgency of climate change. We heard also about how businesses' help is required to make the solutions that government develops effective. I would go one step further. Without businesses, nothing will happen. Businesses, the success or failure of this initiative of fighting climate change and also developing adaptation responses rests very squarely on our shoulders. But we can't do it on our own. We need to work in a system that is that lends itself to business playing its part. And if we fail to do that, our businesses will fail. This is absolutely a matter of commercial and economic survival. It's also a matter of human survival. The planet will be fine if climate change runs rampant, but we as a species will disappear. And if that happens, we don't need to worry too much about paying out our dividends. There will be nothing left to reward, no investors left to reward. So if we want to keep a viable global economy, we have no choice but to confront the climate challenge, and we have no choice but to bring it into the boardroom and incorporate it into our corporate strategies. And that means that our corporate strategies have to be synonymous with transformation strategy, because there isn't a single company that is not going to be affected by climate change. Some much more than others, clearly. I mean, my oil and gas company is sitting in the front lines of being affected by climate change. We operate in a sector that is facing obsolescence, that is facing inevitable decline. And we have two choices. And this is the same for many companies that operate in very high emitting sectors. We can either coast on a rather efficient glide path to extinction, which is a perfectly reasonable and valid business strategy, and just return as much cash to our shareholders as possible so that they can reinvest in other successful, thriving, climate-friendly businesses. Or we can decide to reinvent who we are. And that's the decision that my company has chosen, but not all oil and gas companies have chosen that path. And quite a few have simply said, we're just going to milk this for what it's got, and then we'll disappear. And as I said, that's perfectly reasonable, but we need to do it with our eyes open, and we need to do it in a manner that's transparent. And what we mustn't do is pretend that this crisis isn't happening and that we will continue forever on a business as usual basis. So with that, by way of basic introduction, what happened? Went to the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum immediately set to work conducting a large consultation of board directors, CFOs, CEOs, lawyers, investors, academics, NGOs, to pull together a picture of what a good board should do in respect of climate governance. And it came up with 8 very comprehensive and, in fact, very challenging principles, which are called the Principles for Effective Climate Governance. These are a World Economic Forum product. We, the Climate Governance Initiative, our mission, our raison d'être, is to promote the implementation of these 8 principles. And so, quite simply, we set to work doing 2 things: setting up a network of chapters around the world. And Romania today is number 17 of our chapters, and we have another 4 or 5 that are due to come live in the next 6 weeks or so. And so geographic expansion to make sure that we have good balanced coverage around the world. And secondly, content. And the content consists of developing really useful, practical tools that you and I can take into our boardrooms, into our committees, and say, we need to be doing this, and we're not doing it. Why are we not doing it? What do we need to do it? And I can tell you that I personally have done exactly that. We have an excellent tool that Deloitte UK has produced for us for audit committees. What should audit committees do differently? To ensure that the financial audit, I'm not talking about auditing the sustainability report, I'm talking about the financial audit. How should it be conducted differently How should it take into account net zero scenarios? How should it take into account the likelihood that the carbon price is going to continue to increase? How does that feed into impairment calculations? How should we then disclose the processes that the company and the audit committee has employed in order to then explain why we have taken impairments and why we haven't taken impairments? This is just a perfect illustration of taking a concept that is at its core, a scientific and economic phenomenon, and bringing it into the audit committee and translating into something that we actually do as audit committee members. That's one example. And tomorrow we're going to be launching a new tool on remuneration that is going to be providing guidance on how remuneration committees should identify key performance indicators that are tied specifically to a company's climate transition strategy. And therefore tying it to executive remuneration. So to give you an example, my company, we have identified as an industrial indicator the pace at which we add renewable energy capacity. That has become an industrial target that is tied to executive pay, annual bonus, and long-term share award, in the way that in the past, we used to tie it to exploration success. So you always have a mix, as you know, in remuneration of financial indicators and industrial indicators. We've had to reimagine what our industrial indicators are in light of our transformation strategy. So these are just two of many examples of the types of really practical tools that you will find as a member of Chapter Zero Romania that you can then take back into your boardroom and say, look, this is what other companies are doing. We should have a look at this. We should figure out how to make it work for us. And there are more that are coming. The other thing that we have created by popular request from many of our members is to create global sector hubs. So we bring together directors from around the world in a single sector to come together with each other, learn from each other and from experts, and to go into much more depth on the issues facing their sector. So the first one we've created is financial services. And we bring together directors from banking, insurance, and asset management. And we bring them together to look at some of the really specific issues affecting the sector, such as how the prudential regulatory authorities are putting more and more pressure on financial actors to conduct climate risk audits, and how this then impacts on credit policies, on insurance cover, and of course on investment management, stock selection, and engagement with investee companies. So a few examples here of how when you log on to our programs, you will find things that work for you. I mean, we've developed them. They're developed by directors for directors because directors know what their needs are, and they know that it needs to be really practical. It basically needs to say, what is this issue? What do I need to know? What are the questions I need to ask my management? What sorts of good answers should I be looking for? And how should I report on this externally to my shareholders and to society more broadly? Because as boards, our credibility depends on our stakeholders, our investors and other stakeholders, trusting us to guide our companies towards resilience and success. And many of you will have noticed what happens when investors have lost trust in their directors to fulfill that function. I'm sure you're all aware of a very large US oil and gas company that was the victim of a proxy fight led by a small hedge fund that was nevertheless supported by all of the major institutional investors, the pension funds, but also the BlackRocks and Vanguards and Fidelities and State Streets, who together voted out 3 directors and voted in 3 directors that they had chosen. All right, that is the fate that awaits us as directors if we are negligent in our duties. We have an obligation to our shareholders and to stakeholders more broadly to get this right. And Chapter Zero Romania is here to help you work that out. I know that more and more and more directors care about these issues. They just don't know where to begin. And this is here to solve that problem. So thank you very, very much. I wish you success. I look forward to working with all of you, because this is all about working in a cross-border manner and hearing from each other what works in your countries, what's worked in other countries, what you can bring into your boardrooms and experiment with. We're really here just to help one another get this over the line. So thank you so much, and wishing you not only a very successful event today, but a very successful Chapter Zero Romania.
Thank you so much, Karina. Indeed, we are really grateful for this opportunity to be part of this large family, which is Chapter Zero. And it was actually due to you that this is currently exists and provides so much wealth of information and instruments and tools for board directors to be able to tackle climate change. So we definitely hope that we will contribute to this big family, and will engage more and more non-executive directors in Romania, and who knows, maybe in the neighboring countries, as we initially wanted. But it's a journey, and the clock is ticking, so we need to act swift. And that's why we invited here a number of important business representatives and financial institutions who are going to be critical in financing all these initiatives. And we need to move now from actually what is compliance and reporting, which this is a main activity here in Romania. We need to move really to embed this into business strategy, and to actually ensure that we build competitive advantage along the way. So thank you once again so much. And I would very much like to give the floor to Peter Janssen, who is a moderator for this exciting panel with a lot of actors and partners who are going actually to roll out the Chapter Zero in the future. So Peter, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sorana. I hope everybody can hear me. First of all, welcome to everyone, especially, of course, to my co-panelists, Ramona, Anna, Axel, Sergiu, Raul, Christian, Alexandru, and Mark. My name is Peter Janssen, as Sorana said, and I will be your moderator during the panel discussion we will have on climate governance within some Romanian international organizations. What I would like to get out of this discussion is input from businesses which are actually active in Romania and in the Romanian market, both banks, financial institutions, but also NGOs, universities, etc., to see how they deal with climate change and what climate governance means for them. Before we start the discussion, I would like to thank the Independent Directors Association of Romania, the AAI, and KPMG for organizing this launch. I would especially like to thank Sorana Baciu, the co-founder of Chapter Zero Romania, and the other members of the working group within the AAI, who have made this event today possible. Carmen Segete, Christina Reichman, and Irina Bolome. Thank you very much for organizing this. Today's title for this panel discussion is From Compliance and Reporting to Competitive Advantage, from sustainable business practices. It is only a few years ago, I have to admit, that I really got involved in climate governance. I think in 2015, I was asked by my university to create a module about sustainable business development. Of course, I always realized that businesses have a role to play there, but it was never really clear for me how that role should look like, and also how businesses could somehow align their economic objectives, which is first and foremost making a profit, with other more societal objectives, such as social objectives and especially environmental objectives. when I did my research, I realized that fortunately these things can go together, and that actually climate governance can help businesses to perform better, to be more efficient. Think of very practical things such as waste reduction, reduction of water consumption, electricity consumption, which directly contribute to the bottom line, but also by driving innovation. Sustainability, according to McKinsey, has become the most important driver of innovation. So it can also help companies to create a sustainable competitive advantage. Before I go to my co-panelists, I would like to refer to the UN Brundtland Report from 1987, the so-called Our Common Future Report, which states that sustainability can be defined as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. I think this is still today very much true. If we don't do it for ourselves, we should certainly do it for our future generations, our children and grandchildren. This was a brief introduction. Now I would like to ask my co-panelists to briefly introduce themselves. I think they can do it better than me. Of course, we start with the ladies. Ramona, if I may ask you to introduce yourself first.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for the invitation. Congratulations for the launch of the Chapter Zero. So my name is Ramona Jurubița. I'm country managing partner for KPMG in Romania and Moldova, and I'm also head of our KPMG Impact Plan. This is our global, regional, and local initiatives, which embeds ESG and climate change under one umbrella.
Okay, thank you. Anna Ratnev.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here. And as Ramona said, congratulations. I think it's an important moment. I'm Anna Ratnev. I'm a partner at CMS, the global law firm. I focus on finance and in particular, sustainable finance. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we go to the gentleman. Axel, if I may ask you to introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, thank you. I'm the vice chair of the ISO Technical Committee 309, which has developed which is on governance of organizations and which has recently launched the standard on that. And otherwise, I'm consulting to support organizations to make the transition into purpose-driven, sustainable businesses.
Thank you. Sergio?
Thank you, Peter, and congratulations for the launch of Chapter Zero to everyone. This is an important milestone in Romania right now. My name is Sergio Prescu. I'm the CEO of Alpha Bank Romania and also general manager of the group in charge with the international subsidiaries. I'm also a member of, with our bank, and also on a personal level, I'm a member of the Energy Efficiency Mortgage Initiative at European level. And also I'm a member of the Energy Efficient Label Committee at the level of European Mortgage Federation. Thank you.
Thank you. Raul?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. I'm here as a citizen mainly and an activist, but I will not chain myself up to your gates today because I'm also invited as a consultant and manager in the area of waste management and energy efficiency in buildings. Lately, for a short period of time, I was also state secretary in the Ministry of Environment, covering also sustainability, sustainable development, waste management, but in a little bit of climate change. I would I would try to draw attention on something that was very dear to my ears when I heard Mrs. Litvak saying tools. I am a true believer that we need to shift the discussion from, very broad, high-level concepts and all this mainstream ideas that you already see both in technical events such as COP26, but also in our daily conferences. Let's put it this way, on how the climate is changing, how the business has to adapt, how the future will look like. And I'm a true believer we need to fulfill or to add to these discussions tools, methodologies, and measurements. Now, earlier than yesterday, China has just asked at COP26 that the climate change should not be measured, should rather be described as a qualitative set of indicators, which to me doesn't sound very good. Qualitative means to me something less strong and comparative as quantitative and very strong indicators. And I truly hope that via the directors, the companies can also grab some of that concern and embed it to the factory floor, because otherwise we are talking a lot and we all agree that's the way to go, but the actual climate impact is still happening. And we see that it's our intervention, it's in the right direction, but it might be sometimes too slow. So I hope that via this new vehicle, let's put it this way, we'll be able to accelerate a little bit more the adaptation of the companies and of the of the impact-making entities, adaptation to our desirability, our desires to to reverse or at least to slow down the climate impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul. I think you have already taken up some of the discussion time by going into the topic. Can I ask the next panelist, Christian, to briefly introduce yourself?
Thank you, Peter. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Cristian Nacu. I'm Senior Country Officer for IFC for Romania and Moldova. IFC is a part of the World Bank Group, the private arm of the World Bank Group. For us, of course, sustainable development is, I would say, one of the main goals of our existence, and I'm very glad to contribute here.
Thank you, Christian. Alexandru?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Alexandru Mihai Ghigiu. I'm Vice Rector of the National University of Political Studies and Public Administration in Bucharest. And I'm also teaching public policies, not necessarily policies related to climate change, but as we all know, climate change is not just one policy. We can see it in different policies. And my university is one of the most involved universities in different European and international initiatives related to green transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandru. Looking forward to your contribution. And last but not least, Mark.
Hi, thanks for having me. Mark Davis, EBRD Regional Director for Romania and Bulgaria.
That was short and sweet. Thank you, everyone, for your introductions. Before we go into the actual discussion, briefly, this is how I think it should work. I will start by asking the panel some questions. Some of those questions will be relevant to all participants. Maybe later on there will be some questions which are more specific for specific panelists due to their occupation. Although I will ask these questions, please feel free to engage, to interrupt, to comment. I like it to be a free-flowing discussion. Of course, we have to be polite and let each other finish. But by no means this is an extremely strictly structured discussion. I like it to be a true discussion because I do believe that in a free discussion, the best results will come forward. One last thing is for all my colleagues here on the panel, please turn down your mobile phones. Children are allowed to pop in and out of the screen because they are the future generation and mostly affected by this, and it seems to be also something quite popular with politicians nowadays. Okay, let's start with the first question I would like to ask to all of you, because this is a question about organizational strategy and whether your organization's strategy includes a well-defined holistic climate strategy. For instance, elements like climate risk mitigation, adaptation, as well as business continuity and opportunities. Who would like to start this discussion? Anyone?
I'll take it. I'll take it, Peter.
Thank you, Alex. I'm getting worried.
No, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges is relating to strategy. And it is challenging not because there is an absence of things to do, but the climate change adaptation challenges us, particularly in the medium term. So in the beginning, it's quite easy because there are many things that you can improve on efficiency and you can make the first gains. But ultimately, then you're coming to the point when you really have to think about your whole business model. And when you think about the business model, I think boards have a specifically important role to play because they need to determine the value that the organization is actually trying to achieve. And the nature of that value, the way you define that, either focuses only on the risks or also on the opportunities. And so that is the main role, I think, of boards relating to climate change and many other changes that are currently happening, is to focus on what is our primary purpose, what is the ultimate value we are trying to generate, how is that translated into a value model, and on the basis of that, to give guidance on, to direct the strategy and to engage with the strategy. And it wouldn't be a coincidence if these steps are precisely the first three principles of ISO 37000, because that is at the heart of governance.
Thank you, Axel. We'll come back a bit later also to the ISO 37000 because I'm personally very interested to learn more about that. I think ISO frameworks can really help companies to get going and to really implement it into their organization's processes. Any of the other panelists, could you give us an example of how climate governance is part of your corporate strategy, organizational strategy? Anna.
I was going to, it's strange. I mean, for example, from our perspective as a law firm, to us as a business, having and being able to demonstrate that we do have a sustainable strategy and we're not just in a business of advising others on sustainable strategy is important. We see that, for example, in selection processes. We now, at the level we operate, nobody necessarily, or, it's not necessarily just a matter of demonstrating the expertise on a particular subject, but we need to show diversity. We need to show we have CSR policies, and we don't just have them, but we do implement and act on them. And I think it's really relevant. And that is also shown in how, sort of corporates work. And that's what we see our clients, for example. And that's what's driving. I think if people don't have a strategy, they will need one to keep in, to be in business. And that's what this, chapter 0 is about and what we need to advise on, because we do see, large corporates who have a large suppliers network. One of the way they implement their sustainable strategies by only selecting sustainable or suppliers who are able to fit into a certain strategy. And I think that's really important because that on one hand helps to, let's say, expand the requirements for sustainability. So a supplier who perhaps thought, I'm too small, I'm a small company, I don't need to do that. They will have to understand that it's not a size, it's not, you're not supposed to be sustainable only if you're one of the large global corporates. It's about everyone and every company. So they're always saying, about the citizens. So it's really, we see that, it's happening, and it's really relevant. I think further down the discussion, we can talk about how I think we've now in an area where for a very long time, this has been a voluntary compliance. It was a sort of a statement of adhering to certain good corporate principles, but now the regulation circle is getting tighter and tighter. I think all the discussions around COP26 are geared to that, as Catherine was saying, and the group led by Mark Carney. So it's going to become a responsibility, which again is very relevant in terms of director liability and board members.
Thank you, Anna. Ramona?
Yes, I could also complement a bit looking at best practices in the market, but also looking at one challenge that usually boards would face when confronting this climate change. And this is the perception that this is too costly and therefore is difficult to justify perhaps an expense. And I think this is a common misconception when we are talking about climate change response and how a business must tackle this topic, because there is an expectation that significant amounts of capital are needed in order, to adapt to new infrastructure, new technologies, and so on. But in many scenarios that we've seen in discussing with clients and other stakeholders, is that by simply framing the issue of climate change at strategic level, at board level, it becomes extremely clear that reducing emissions, waste, and better use of resources can basically bring a reduction in the overall cost base of a company. And of course, responding strategically to climate risks can also bring a reduction of risks which are coming from physical exposure, physical risks, which are those natural floods and so on and so forth. But also, on the other hand, on the opportunity side, it's what the other speakers were saying, is that you can discover that you can tap into new markets, you can discover new products, and you can adapt new services. So basically, all in all, the quantification of the climate change risk brings additional opportunities and better management of the risk.
Thank you, Ramona. Anyone else of our panelists would like to add to this?
May I intervene here?
Yes, Christian.
So we at IFC, as I said, we are a development institution, so sustainable development is part of our role. But I want to say that we factor in ESG considerations in every investment we make. And our ESG standards are widely adopted globally by a large number of international investors. And are also used by firms to improve their practices. ESG performance standards and corporate governance methodology provide clear guidance to firms on good international practices. We found that good corporate governance is essential in order to put in place the right systems to embed good environmental and social practices. IFC guidance is publicly available and is used by many multinational firms. Even further, we have now embedded the methodology to look at alignment with Paris Agreement. We have actually a team dedicated to that. And my colleagues developed a tool in line with our new climate change action plan to support green, resilient, inclusive development. When IFC is making an investment, we not just impose some strict requirements, but we also help the client to meet these standards, and we consider its impact on society and the environment. We are seeing that our clients are now increasingly understanding the risks and addressing them and providing long-term value to the companies and make them more resilient. I will probably explain a little bit more. We have done also some studies which are showing some hard figure benefits of being proactive on that.
Oh, okay, thank you, Christian. I see some more hands up. Alexandru, what would you like to add to this?
Thank you, Peter. I will try to be short, not to monopolize the discussion, because in our case, as a university and also as a public institution, the situation is a little bit different. But in fact, we are having, I would dare to say that we are having three main strategies or three main direction in the university. The first one is related to academic programs. So it's the decision of the university to try to put this subject of climate change, green transition, and so on in different academic programs. I mean, special courses in different programs, but also the whole program dedicated to subject related to climate change. The other one is the other way, the other strategy is related to the university as an example. For example, we are trying to transform our campus in a zero carbon emission campus. For example, our students, they are learn to recycle, all our staff is doing this, our buildings are using, the majority of them, not all yet, are using green energy and so on and so forth. So this would be the university as an example. And the third one is what we are doing in relation with our partners. For example, we are offering to different institutions support, expertise in building their strategies, building different documents. And it's our aim to try to convince, to persuade this institution to have the climate change on their strategy. And in all our contacts, in all our lobby activities and so on, we are trying to convince the institution to be part of this change. So at least in our case, we are having these three main pillars, trying to be part of this project, of this change. And I think the universities, the educational system in general, has a central part in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandru. I agree with you. I think universities have a very important role to play here, as you said, on different levels, but especially also creating even more awareness among students about the importance of climate change and ways to mitigate it. Sergiu.
Yes, I will try to be very brief. I think that as a representative of a financial institution, we all know that we are also at the same time subject of this change, because there is a regulatory wave and framework that is moving our way. But at the same time, we should be, and we position ourselves as being drivers of change, of this change in the society at large. So I think that, the main if I may call it that way, the main understanding that we all have to employ at this moment is that, sustainability brings also value to our organizations. It's not only that there is a risk that we can see there, and therefore we have to move away from the compliance type of approach that we are currently employing, or most of the organizations that are currently employing, towards a more important way in which ESG, for example, in our case, is becoming part of the culture and of the operations of the organization. So, moving away from a compliant type of approach to a cultural approach in which you are transforming and you are changing the entire culture of the organization is probably the next step that we all have to do. And I'm very, very happy that, we are talking already about tools that could be deployed at the level of the boards, at the level of the organization, so that on one hand, we do the baselining that we all need to do at this moment in order to understand where we stand in this particular moment. And at the same time, we develop, based on that baselining, we are going to develop going forward business strategies that are going to, as I said, create value for these organizations, because I think that this value creation comes in 4 different sort of pillars for any organization, regardless of whether it is financial or non-financial. I think it will bring more trust. And trust is the fiber of what we all need to employ at this moment in order to create this kind of new syntax in the society. I think it will also be able to create and will bring to organization more growth, because there will be areas that are going to grow at a faster sort of dynamic than others. And understanding this new change in the business landscape will allow you to position yourself in the right growth areas. I think it's going to bring also lower cost. And why not? It's going to mitigate and to address the risk. It's going to bring at the same time a lower risk approach vis-a-vis various type of climate risks that we are going to face going forward. So I think in a nutshell, this is the profound transformation that most of the organizations will need to employ going forward right now.
Thank you, Sergio. It's good to hear that most organizations represented by all of you do have climate mitigation strategies in place, do also think about how they can go from mitigation to actually changing their overall business model in order to become more competitive on a sustainable level. A famous strategist said, Chandler, I think it was, he said, structure follows strategy. So we talked about strategy here, but I would also be interested in structure, and especially board structure. So my next question would be, has your board or management team, how have they effectively integrated climate considerations into their, for instance, board committee structures? Is there an existing, are they integrated in an existing board committee, or maybe is there a dedicated climate sustainability committee? Anyone who would like to take this answer, this question? Yes, Axel?
Yeah. So at ISO, the ISO Council, which is the governing body for the ISO, the organization, has not developed a separate structure within the council, but it is working with the existing committees, and it has established a number of advisory groups that bring together both governance as well as technical experts to look at the integration within the organization and the role that the organization can play outside. And so it has committed as an organization that all new and revised standards will be focused or actively consider climate science and the transition in their development. And to do that, ISO, being a very inclusive organization with 166 members and 100,000 experts and so forth, has a wide reach, but its purpose is to intentionally reach out to most vulnerable communities and be able to bring that part in. So at the board level, at the council level, it is working through its own structure and it's applying its own medicine, as it were, in doing that.
Thank you, Axel. Anyone else would like to comment on this? So what I would be interested in is indeed to see what kind of dedicated structures exist within your company to tackle these issues. Of course, the board as the overall body responsible for direction and control, of course, they will discuss matters related to climate change. But does any of the organizations you work for have a chief sustainability officer? Do you have a separate department which looks into sustainability related issues? Do you have a board committee which is especially focused on climate issues?
Hi, Mark here. I have my hand up. I don't know if you can see it.
Sorry. Yes, Mike. Mark, please.
Thanks. I'm suspecting it's still early days for a lot of boards to have dedicated structure, but I'm sure people are moving quickly. And I think this gets back to the last question a little bit. If you think about climate change and the impact on our business, it's a long-term risk which is hard to predict, and it wouldn't typically be on the top of your risk management agenda. It would be sort of a tail risk out there that you weren't sure about. But the fact is that the mainstream is changing rapidly, and so the need for action is imminent. So I think that's the reaction. People are starting to wake up and understanding that this is hugely important, and the risks are also imminent. I mean, regulatory changes and penalties, added regulations that we're going to have to deal with. I haven't seen any countries as part of COP26 say we're going to do deregulation to make room for the new regulations on climate. So this is more regulations we need to be ready for. There's a lot of definition uncertainty around how to measure social and environmental and governance impact overall, and on climate, I think it's a little easier, but still there's some basis risk in terms of what's measured, what's reported, what's valued, and what's penalized. I think access to finance is going to be a major issue. We're seeing the financial institutions, we're seeing private equity move away from, for example, now fossil fuels, but it'll go on and on. Customer and employee goodwill, I think, is a huge factor. I think employees care, and I think customers are going to care about the climate governance of the corporation. The costs associated with change, including borrowing costs, and I'll come back to that. And then I think also sometimes we're getting politics over physics, and we need to keep physics over politics. So what I mean by that is, if you think about the massive increase, for example, planned by Romania in renewables, we also need a balancing market, and we're looking at ways to do that. And we have the IFIs saying we can't do fossil fuels, therefore gas as a transition fuel is no longer acceptable to a large degree. And I think EBRD is kind of on the fence on that. It's very difficult. But so we can look forward to probably energy blackouts. We can look forward to inflationary impact, tax impact from financing some of these changes, and the disposable income of our consumers going down. So those are some of the risks that are real, and they're coming. So we have to be ready for those. And as was already mentioned, there are massive opportunities here around it. Obviously, the post-COVID growth strategy, if you look at the RRF or the PNR in Romania, the resilience facility from the EU, it's a green focus, right? It's a digital, green, smart focus. There are better ways of doing business to eliminate waste and reduce cost. I think being on the edge of development opens up opportunities to exploit profit opportunities in green transition. I think strengthening climate corporate governance and reporting goes hand in hand with improved corporate governance and transparency, which has been proven to be really good for share prices. And I think there's significant interest in asset allocation to sustainably linked financial products, which is actually opening up opportunities. We're seeing it for things that may not have been financed otherwise, to set themselves up in the right way to get finance. So I think this is real. And boards need to move on this. Corporate governance at EBRD, we're like IFC. We've been on this for a long time. I can tell you that out of 450 million euro we've used our balance sheet in Romania this year, 85% of that have been qualified as green economic transition, which it's a pretty high standard. It's specifically, and it's prorated to the money being used for carbon reduction, ultimately carbon reduction strategies. Every deal that we do has to be Paris aligned. And that's not just reducing carbon, but ensuring that the investment doesn't prolong investments in carbon producing technologies. So that's a tough one, and we're doing this calculation on every deal. And just before I let the floor go, because there's a lot of people to talk in, but I really need to advertise a little bit here because we're doing some things that I think are important to this group. Obviously, there's been the central bank working group on green finance we've been a part of. I think that's great. There's some, we've done over $1 billion across 30 sustainably linked bonds across EBRD countries of operations. We've done a couple here in the financial sector already this year, and we're looking to do our first corporate one. So we're very excited about that. When you see that deal come, I can't name it. It's really an exciting company that has tackled this stuff very early on and are coming with a really significant carbon reduction strategy in a carbon intensive area. So that's pretty exciting. We're working with the Bucharest Stock Exchange on improved sustainable corporate governance for listed companies. And we have 25 million euro available, not just in Romania, but specifically available for TC for our clients in climate corporate governance, covering governance, strategy, risk management, metrics, and targets. So we take this absolutely seriously. We're here to help. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Some other panelists would like to add to this. Raul.
Well, based on the long silence in the beginning after you just popped out the question, I would expect that not too many boards have a specific structure dedicated to climate change. Moreover than that, and also building on what Mrs. Lidwad was saying, that directors don't know where to begin, my experience as a consultant tells me that also the executives don't really know where to begin from because they were hired to do something else. They are the best engineers, they are the best maybe CFOs, they are the best people managers and so on. They're not the best scientists when it comes to climate, and even less so the best translator between the science and the technology and the factory floor processes. I believe, yes, we will need to change that very quickly. We don't have the luxury on doing it on our own pace because the data shows that we're not doing it greatly until now. And for that, I think it's needed. Okay, we are in the perfect place to have this multiplicator effect. If not from the directors, then from whom will you be able to spread the news and the new directions into all the ranks of the organization? Definitely, we are in the best place to start from, but probably we need to complement that with more actionable things. We were talking about criteria for getting cheaper finance, but we also need to talk about actual tools that need to be implemented, different industry from industry. It's not the same thing to do the greening up of a law company as it is for a production company or for a tourism infrastructure and so on and so forth. And here we have probably an actor which is not active enough, which are the industry associations, the ones who are able to build a case and to build a comparability between various businesses in the same sector in order to reach that baseline or benchmarking ability, which we need to be able to identify where the gaps are and where the priority intervention should focus. Everything we talk about it here, it's high level. It might apply to a handful of companies, which is fine because generally they are the most energy intensive, let's say, companies that we are looking at. But most of the other climate impact comes from various smaller sources, which might not have the tools to address their business transformation challenge. And since Romania is probably one of the most prominent or most relevant examples of politics over physics, we need to do that within the private sector. If we are able to set down a dialogue and to be a viable dialogue partner to the government and even maybe keep consistency across various government changes, is so much the better. We cannot rely on just on regulations coming down on us because they usually come very late, very abruptly, with changes that need to be or even identified overnight and generally costs money. And when you're talking money, we're talking millions of dollars or of euros. I just have one single example in mind, which is the coming, top down, which is the non-recycled plastic fee, which is going to affect tens of thousands of companies in Romania, extracting from them over 150 million euros a year. And until now, they have no position, no action, nothing to tackle that. Okay, they might not be able to prevent it, but they might be able to better prepare for it. And here we have the gap that I've talked already, in my first intervention. We need to identify and spread out actionable items of very concrete things to do for the companies.
I agree, Raul. I think we started a discussion about strategy, climate strategy. We went a bit into structure, but in the end, if a strategy is going to be implemented, what we need is basically KPIs, key performance indicators.
And people, and people, because it's not enough to switch the lady from the PR from CSR to sustainability.
Absolutely
that will not work.
Absolutely true. And I think also, as you indicated, industry bodies could play a role here, because having a KPI is one thing, but KPIs need to have a norm. What exactly do we want to attain? And that, of course, is different for each industry. So if industry bodies could, for instance, come up with some indicators, some KPIs, plus certain norm levels that could be should be achieved, I think that would be a practical step forward. Axel.
Yes. So the part I was going to add is that in terms of structure, from a governance perspective, one of the things that 37,000 is introducing is guidance for how to develop an integrated governance framework. And the reason it's integrated is for two reasons. The first thing is that what are you integrating in the governance work? And that is you need to integrate both the impact that the organization is generating, the ultimate impact it is generating, together with the ultimate means on which it relies, so nature, right? And only if you bring the impact and nature into actual decision-making can you develop strategies and approaches and governance and value that is appropriate and sustainable. So that's number one. But the second aspect is how you structure that. And there is often the misconception that it is only a board that governs, but the board is responsible for the governance framework and the whole system, but there are other bodies involved in governance. So for example, in the case of ISO itself, using it to the organization, it's the council that is the governing body, but it has also the technical management board and the technical committees, which also need to govern and be involved in this process. And if you look at it from a private company perspective, then you would also have, for example, the shareholder assembly, which has an important role to play, as well as your subsidiaries in different divisions. And because the topic that we're dealing with is so complex, unless all the bodies are actually involved and doing their part as they should, the organization will not be able to be governed properly in that regard. And so there, I think we need to look at then the competence and the competency and make a distinction between the two. So I think the Climate Governance Initiative and Chapter 0 provide very good tools that enable an organization to go through and say, are these the questions that we can answer individually from a personal competency perspective? Can we answer this without further assistance? And if you say, well, I can read about it and I can ask somebody, well, then you're not yet competent, right? So, but the second question you need to ask is collectively, are we competent collectively to deal with the matters that come before us? And if you go to the list of topics that are dealt with in the primer and in the other documents that are part of the resource material in Chapter 0 and the Climate Initiative, and you say, well, these are topics that we can't yet deal with, well, you're not competent. And so you need to find a way of fixing that.
Thank you, Axel. It's my experience as well that ISO standards can also very much help to practically implement things into organizations. Because I fully agree with you that you need to have the the competencies and also competent people to be able to implement. It's great to have an efficient and a strategy in which climate governance plays a prominent role. But if you're not able to implement it actually on the work floor, it just remains a nice idea, but not much will happen. Thank you. There are two more people. Anna, what would you like to contribute to this discussion?
I was going to say, sort of going back to the original question, that we do see, whilst it's still early, as Mark was saying, I think people are gearing up to it. We do see companies creating sustainability roles. Perhaps, it's true, we see that at larger companies, but it's definitely something that's happening. It's boards are preoccupied. And I think what's one of the drivers, and that's what we're all working towards, as I said, is the sort of the upcoming regulation on one hand. Second is investors. I mean, when you've mentioned it as well, there are many investors now who would not invest in businesses that are not sustainable or have sustainable goals. Due diligence now has a large part of sustainability in it, and I think IFIs, like EBRD, IFC are seen as standards there. Their policies and their ways of due diligencing businesses are clearly standards. They've been doing that for years, and we see that. I'm a finance lawyer, and you see that finance transactions now have a very large element of disclosures, ESG disclosures. There's an industry standard that has been developed, a market standard. And, in order to be able to comply with these requirements, your lenders' requirements, your investors' requirements, you do need to create and be able to have, the internal mechanisms and people and educate people to reply to that and have a consistent reporting system. And that's something that now actually needs to be worked on. I don't think we need to wait for further regulations. People are actively working towards is developing, and the more it's been asked for, we also see, standards of reporting packages being prepared, and how companies are looking to respond. So indeed, we do see a trend towards creating, and education will be important, of course, for these roles. But these are, in my view, now the current key drivers.
Thank you, Anna. You briefly mentioned also climate-related reporting. I would like to go into that a little bit later. I also would like to make everyone aware we are entering the last 10 minutes of this session, so I will start speeding up a little bit. But before we go to the reporting question, Christian, you would like to add something?
Yes, thank you. Because you asked about what our organizations are doing. I just want to say that we have a new climate change action plan for 2021 to 2025, and I mean the World Bank Group as a total. And this new action plan represents a shift from looking to green projects to greening the entire economy, and from focusing on inputs to focusing on inputs. And we are all acting according to this new action plan, and all our efforts are into this direction. Last year, for example, out of the 429 million that IFC has put at work in Romania, more than 70% of that was green financing. And we are focusing a lot on that, trying to help all the companies, not only our clients, but also other companies which are asking our support to introduce that in their day-to-day practice.
Thank you, Christian. Yes, it doesn't surprise me that multinational financial institutions such as yours and EBRD are a few steps ahead of most other organizations in this respect, and that you very carefully look into investment decisions, also with an eye to to a possible climate impact. Quickly to a next topic, which is about climate-related reporting. I guess all of you, all of the organizations you work in, to some extent will do climate-related reporting. What I would be interested in is, we all know the phenomenon of greenwashing. Greenwashing, basically you say that what you do as an organization really helps the environment, but in reality it's nice words, but on the ground not too much is changing. Now, I would be interested to know whether the organization you work for actually report on areas where progress has been insufficient or even lagging, or where things have not gone to plan. Because then you go from maybe from the realm of PR, you go to real fact-based reporting, when you also dare to admit that actually you haven't been that successful all the time. Challenging question. Who would like to have the floor?
You know, Peter, like taxes, if it's mandatory, it will happen. If not, not so much.
Yes, I guess so. But maybe I'm an optimist. Maybe I'm an optimist. I think that more and more people, even without maybe all the mandatory laws in place, do realize we have to take action, and are actually of goodwill and really want to make a difference. Mark, please. Yes.
Yeah, this is such a tricky one, actually.
It is.
EBRD is a little bit different than a corporate, so it's tricky. But you know, and we're talking with IFC about this, and this is sort of more at the corporate level than Romania level. But you know, we're like the impact bank. We started doing this in 1991. That's what we do. Every deal has to have transition impact. And we have a whole process. I mean, economists have a veto at EBRD. I mean, you know, we're trying to get this thing right. We take it very seriously. And yet when we get rated by the impact rating agencies, we actually don't do that well. And it's tricky when we issue a lot of green bonds, for example, but we have to cherry pick our book to the things that are accepted as green finance. You know, if you go into and I've done it, so I know, you know, we go in and do a gold mine in Armenia, which we invested equity in, and I was involved. And you know, you're going from a place where environmental practices in that sector are horrible, and then you do something that's challenging for the environment, but you do it in the right way. You raise the standard for everyone else. You create transparency around it. It's massively impactful, but you get penalized for doing that deal, right? From an impact perspective in terms of your rating. And then on the other hand of this, you know, we have a lot of top name investment banks with making money off of, you know, both attracting in sustainable capital and then also investing in and arranging vehicles for that and being the manager of the way those things are measured. And that's kind of an issue. And you know, and IFC has really been a leader here in trying to come up with a global standard for what's considered impact. And I have to admit, we have an issue with it in the sense that we won't qualify for it, because a lot of the stuff that we do, we know that it's impact, but it's the market doesn't recognize it because it's so, you know, it's hard to trust our process and that everybody here is doing the right thing and that these things are complicated, right? So this is an area that's really, it's a real issue. It's really an issue in change. We're trying to get it right, and IFC is leading among other IFIs on this, and we're trying to figure it out with them. And you know, and that's what I talked about a little bit earlier. This sort of what I consider basis risk, what you're actually doing and what you're measuring and what people are looking for. There's a difference between physics and what you're actually what you're looking for. So really tough. We're not going to get it right for a long time, but there will be a standard that will be closer to physics, I think. And you know, that's something we'll have to manage through as at the board level to understand it and to adjust accordingly, and obviously participate in getting it right. And I think Some of the initiatives at the country level are very important. There's a capital market strategy now being developed by the ACFE and the Ministry of Finance, supported by OECD. Getting that measurement as part of this is going to be really important, I think, and other things like this group. So thanks very much. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. That was a very honest answer. What you're saying basically is we're trying hard, but we are not there yet. It's very complicated, and it will take quite some time before we really get it right. I see Sergio. Sergio, you would like to add something to this discussion?
Yeah, I think that, again, echoing what Mark was saying, I think this is a tricky one but I cannot really address this question without referring to the context of regulation. As a financial institution, you know that we are subject to very strong and intense regulation in the last period of time, particularly with regards to ESG. And I would like to bring in discussion the climate risk stress test that is going to be launched in 2022. I think this is an important exercise that has certain key objectives. The first one will be to identify the weaknesses, is actually addressing your question. I mean, this is exactly what ECB is trying to achieve at this moment, in order to identify the weaknesses that exist within the financial sector in EU. They want to understand at the same time the industry best practices, because I'm sure that within this very heterogeneous type of landscape, we are going to see best practices and we are going to see laggards as well. So, within this context, we need to know of each other, or what others are doing at this moment. So, sorry, I don't know whether it's coming from me or not.
No, that's my alarm. I put that alarm for myself to be sure. Okay. To remind myself that we are almost at the end.
Of course, the last thing that ECB will, probably the more important thing that ECB would like to achieve by launching this climate risk stress testing exercise is to challenge the banks and with regards to the risks that they are facing in this. And the stress test exercise is going to be built on 3 modules. We are going to answer a questionnaire at this moment. We are going to have a peer benchmarking exercise, and we are going to have a bottom-up stress test at the level of the financial institution. That is going to surface a lot of weaknesses and a lot of strengths at the level of the financial institutions in European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergio. That's very interesting. A quick one. I think it has to be the last one. Christian.
Thank you. Just wanted to answer to Raul's comment that it has to be mandatory to happen. I think it's more than that. I think it's also profitable to happen. So just to give you a few numbers, I've recently looked at the performance of 650 clients in our portfolio and found out that the good ESG clients, the clients which are having a good performance, have outperformed by 210 basis points on return on equity the clients with worse performance, and 110 basis points on return on assets. Also, they outperformed by 130 basis points the MSCI Emerging Market Index. So I think it pays off. It's not just that it has to be mandatory, but it's also
good for business.
It's good for business, exactly.
But to the same extent, they also have better boards, able to organize also all the rest of the business, not just the ESG related stuff. Yeah.
Yes, there's probably a correlation there for sure. And the last one, Ramona, and then I have to wrap it up.
Thank you. I feel the need to complement the discussion, because I think we were talking about climate risk, which is one element of ECJ, right? So, but the two are not the same. While ECJ reporting involves measurement and actions, let's say, on reducing the business impact across a broader set of environment, social, and governance, I think the climate risk is different. And also the standards by which we are reporting are different. And I would say, to conclude, that this is the difference between being a responsible business. This is, having performing well on the ECG benchmarks, and not necessarily a resilient business if we are looking at the climate change disclosures.
Thank you, Ramona. I think we've come to the end of this very interesting discussion. Let me finish by thanking all of you for your valuable contributions. I definitely learned something. I hope the audience learned something as well. I hope we learned from one another. And to sum it up, I think especially this panel, of course, consists of people who are more than aware of climate change and the importance of climate governance, if only because that's why you were invited in the first place. But I think it also becomes clear that there's still a way to go. There is awareness, there are goals, but sometimes they are conflicting with other business interests. And foremost, we need to make sure that we actually get to a stage where we implement and make the changes that are necessary. And I think implementation is always the most difficult part. We can all dream up a new strategy relatively easy, but actually implementing it the way it was meant to be, I think that's the big challenge. And that's something probably most companies and most organizations will be struggling with in the near future. This is it as far as I'm concerned. Again, thank you very much, panelists, for being here and sharing your experiences and your knowledge. I think I can now turn to Sorana.
Yes, thank you very much, Peter, and thank you indeed to all the panelists. And I can also understand also the frustration that there was enough time to discuss all the important matters that are of the concern of our panelists, who are indeed, I would say, the role models in this area, but I have to underline the fact that this is only the launch. This is only the beginning. It's only creating the awareness that this chapter 0 exists, and there will be plenty of opportunities to address in detail all the relevant topics that were discussed today, and even much more, I would say. I would also like to thank you, so not only every one of you, but also your organization. I would like to thank you, KPMG, for making this possible today, this event. And it's not a coincidence that the panelists today are also our supporters and our partners in this endeavor. An endeavor that will start, as I said, a long journey from now on. And I would actually kindly invite Simona Fătu, the new president of Independent Directors Association, to present the objectives and the agenda of this chapter 0 going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sorana. Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be within the next 2 years your guide on this journey that starts today with the launching of Chapter 0 Romania. The difficulty in approaching this topic, I think, is that although we all face the same climate emergency, we do not all agree upon the measures to be taken. But at the same time, to succeed, we all need to be part of the solution. The emerging concerns among various stakeholders groups to integrate environmental, social, and governance factors in the decision-making process at the board level have necessitated regulators to impose requirements in setting up specific reporting and develop board and employees' competencies in public listed companies, in state-owned companies, and other regulated domains. Board members are therefore key influencers and ultimate decision makers. They need to advise executives. They must oversee their performance, and for this, they must possess ESG competencies. Current ESG issues and challenges, I would say, are derived historically from a weak corporate governance of the board of directors and their executives. Therefore, board engagement is vital if companies are going to fully assess climate risks, to identify and invest in the right opportunities, and to develop their own business strategies for climate change mitigation and adaptation. Chapter Zero Romania has been formed by board members for board members under the auspices of World Economic Forum. This was established to increase awareness of the business implications of climate change, to provide knowledge on the issues, as well as toolkits and frameworks through free of charge seminars and modules for members. The goal is to ensure high quality and effective boardroom debates and decisions, as well as to find ways to achieve shareholders or stakeholders alignments, probably the most difficult task of the board members. The transformation is profound because we must adapt our social contract and our economic models while growing business and delivering value. And Chapter Zero Romania is set to deliver know-how, to deliver information on future market trends, to deliver guidance. The objective, as I mentioned, is to increase awareness of our community members upon their decision effects and to disseminate good practices in the Romanian business environment. Aiming to achieve this, we are committed to organize in 2022 and in 2023 a series of dedicated events centered around the 8 climate governance principles that were built by World Economic Forum on existing corporate governance framework, as well as other climate risk and resilience guidelines, such as TCFD. The white paper published by a group of experts from the World Economic Forum and PricewaterhouseCoopers is a useful tool to help elevate the strategic climate debate and drive holistic decision-making that includes careful consideration of the links between climate change and our businesses. Our association will be the platform on which reputable influencers, climate specialists from a broad range of institutions and leading businesses will debate and raise awareness on the following topics. Climate accountability on boards. We all know that boards, through its stewardship, is ultimately accountable to stakeholders and to shareholders for the long-term success of the company. Accordingly, the board should be accountable for the company's long-term resilience with respect to potential shifts in the business landscape that may result from climate change. Failure to do so may constitute a breach of directors' duties. The second topic is command of the subject. The board should ensure that its composition is sufficiently diverse in knowledge, skills, experience, and background to effectively debate and take decisions informed by an awareness and understanding of climate-related threats and opportunities. Board structure is the third topic linked to the previous one, but different in many aspects. As the stewards of the long-term performance of the company and its resilience, the board should determine the most effective way to integrate climate considerations into its structures and committees. The fourth topic is material risk and opportunity assessment. The board should ensure that management assesses the short, medium, and long-term materiality of climate-related risks and opportunities for the company on an ongoing basis. The board should further ensure that the organization's actions and responses to climate are proportionate to the materiality of climate to the company. And the subject that integrates all the above mentioned topics is strategic and organizational integration, a task to which the board should ensure that climate is systemically embedded into strategic management, investment planning, and decision-making processes. And it's also inserted into the management of risk and opportunities across the organization. But none of the above will be properly implemented if executives' incentives are not aligned to promote the long-term prosperity of the company. Therefore, the sixth topic we prepare is incentivization. The board should consider including climate-related targets and indicators in their executive incentive schemes, and if appropriate, to propose to the shareholders to extend variable incentives to non-executive directors as well. The principle 7 governing our seventh topic is obviously reporting and disclosure. The board should ensure that material climate-related risks, opportunities, and strategic decisions are consistently and transparently disclosed to all stakeholders, particularly to investors, and, where required, to regulators. Such disclosure should be made in the financial filings, such as annual reports and accounts, and be subject to the same disclosure governance as financial reporting. And last but not least, the final topic is exchange. The board should maintain regular exchanges and dialogues with peers, policymakers, investors, and all other stakeholders to encourage the sharing of methodologies and to stay informed about the latest climate-relevant risks, regulatory requirements, and other similar topics. I think tackling climate change is the biggest challenge facing our generation, and the transition to green has a major impact on business models, on individuals and communities, just to mention a few of them. Board members are called to act and to take rapid and difficult decisions, sometimes under time pressure and sometimes maybe without proper substantiation behind. Therefore, it's important as board members to understand the consequences of our own decisions and to have performed individual assessments. And I believe this is why continuous learning, debating and sharing experiences are vital to board members, and AAI is here to facilitate this process. Finally, I would like to thank you for having joined this Chapter 0 Romania launching event. I am grateful to all remarkable speakers at this event for taking time and sharing with us interesting ideas and valuable information. Special thanks to KPMG, the partner of this conference, to Sorana, to Carmen, and the entire AAA working group for making this possible. The scope of this initiative is to mobilize executives and non-executive directors on the boards of the Romanian companies to promote the implementation of the World Economic Forum's principles for effective climate governance in the companies they serve, aiming to facilitate the transition to a net zero carbon economy by 2050. The adverse result from environmental corporate failures of the last decades have caused financial losses to the investors, but also caused systemic impact to the economy, environment, and society at large. We therefore have to keep in our minds the importance of the role of the executives and non-executive directors in building companies' business models and their strategies. Our particular issue today, climate change and ESG competencies at board level, are more important than ever, and hopefully will be achieved further during this journey that we prepare for the next years. I'm ending this conference with a deep feeling and honor that Romanian Chapter Zero is now part of a global community, which is committed to continue acting in a dynamic way towards setting, implementing carbon transition targets, about reporting and informing upon the progress made in achieving this goal. Given the number of today's participants, I feel that we have succeeded in raising awareness, and I wish this to be maintained and even to be increased within the months to come. My sincere thank you to all who made this event a success, and till we meet again, I encourage you to monitor the activities of the Romanian Independent Board Members Association, AAI. Thank you very much.